Here from the 22nd Congressional District in the Congress of the United States, representing Broome County and the surrounding area, I have focused much of my attention over the past several years on the potential consequences, both good and bad, of natural gas drilling in the Marcellus shale. Part of my job is to ensure that the laws protecting our public health and environment and the regulatory apparatus needed to enforce these laws keep pace with ever-changing circumstances.
We've heard a lot about nothing has ever happened in New York. Well, folks, high-volume hydrofracking has not happened in New York. There's a big difference between a 100,000 gallon hydrofrac and a 3 million to 5 million gallon hydrofrac. And so, look at the geology. Second, we don't. One of the things that the Hazen and Slur report said very convincingly is that we currently do not, in the Northeast, have the capacity to clean the flowback fluids, the total dissolved solids, the brine. We don't have the facilities to clean that. And folks, deep injection is not the answer. Same reason that we're concerned about the geology and the vertical migration of chemicals from contaminated chemicals from below to the upper levels, we need to be concerned about deep injection. You would not let GE deep inject PCBs. You shouldn't. Some of the fracking fluids contain benzene and hydrocarbons. That wasn't mentioned by previous speakers, but they are part of fracking fluids when they're disclosed. Finally, you need to be seriously concerned at anticipated levels of hydrofracking and refracking. We're talking about withdrawing up to 4 billion gallons a year from New York's surface waters. Can we really not alter the ecosystems of those rivers and streams at that rate? You need to look and see whether or not, because our surface waters are our life in New York State. Water in New York State is the most precious resource we have, and we can't afford to contaminate it. Thank you.
Years ago, my husband and I leased our mineral rights to a gas company, believing that natural gas was a relatively clean fuel, not wanting to be NIMBY, thinking that extraction could be done safely. That was before shale gas exploitation was being talked about. As we became aware of Marcellus development, we were horrified. We did not believe that we signed up to have toxic chemicals pumped under ours and our neighbors' properties, so we formed FLEAST, an organization for people like us who were duped. The study needs to focus on the real, not the ideal. While it may be theoretically possible to do it right, the reality is that spills, leaks, careless well casings are part of the practice, especially in the rush to drill. It is this reality that needs to be studied by looking at sites where problems have been identified.
So we urge the EPA to widen the study to include stages before and after hydraulic fracturing that are necessary for extraction of natural gas from shale. Transport of chemicals is number one, can cause leaks and spills which contaminate air and water. Not yet diluted, the chemicals are more concentrated than during fracking, and therefore more dangerous. As John Hanger, Secretary of Pennsylvania's DEP, has said, there have been too many leaks, too many spills, and too many instances of gas migrating to water supplies. 2, drilling fluids have included diesel fuel containing the carcinogen benzene and sodium dichromate containing hexavalent chromium.
In Pennsylvania, where 32 families cannot drink their water because since the drilling started 2 years ago, they cannot bathe in the water. Gas, methane is being released through stacks that's connected to their water wells so that those wells do not explode. We've had one well explode in January of 2009.
There's no reason to compromise our water, a common good for all, over economics. And so I did a little research on my own, and in Pennsylvania in the last 2 years, dozens of environmental accidents at drilling sites have taken place, and companies have been cited more than 1,400 times for safety violations.
My concern is what stays under the ground. Tens of thousands of wells were drilled in the Marcellus shale, and each well is initially fracked with 5 million gallons of fracking fluid, then hundreds of billions or even trillions of gallons of toxic fluid will be injected into the earth. 80 to 90% of this fluid will remain underground. It will remain there as a threat today and for decades to come. The gas industry would have us believe that hydraulic fracturing is an exact science, but it's not. The fracturing models used by the industry lack the complexity of the real world. The geology of the Marcellus region bears little relation to the solid formations that the industry uses in its computer simulations. Moreover, the region has already been repeatedly fractured by natural forces over eons. Each of the natural faults in a potential pathway could permit gases and fluids to migrate from the production strata toward our drinking water supplies. 150 years, tens of thousands of conventional wells have been drilled in the region, and many of them are played out, abandoned, and long forgotten. The Marcellus Accountability Project for Tompkins County has estimated that there are between 18,000 and 48,000 abandoned wells in New York State alone. Each of these wells offers a potential path of least resistance that could transport millions of gallons of fracking fluid from the target shale formation to drinking water aquifers and to the surface. We are supposed to believe that these chemicals will never migrate through newly created or naturally occurring fractures or through oil well bores into our drinking water. But where is the proof of this? What really happens when a region as geologically complex as the Northeast is fractured and then injected with oceans of poisonous fluid? Does anyone know the answer? Will the EPA have to answer all these questions with hard science, or are we to be assured that public health is not being sacrificed for corporate profits?
Portland County is a prime example of an area where the geology allows and provides easy conduit of water and fluids from the surface to our groundwater. A gas well salt brine spill some 30 years ago continues today to contaminate the groundwater 3,000 feet from the spill site in the town of Hartford.
Clean water is a God-given right. Please protect it for us.
I live right on the edge of Tiger County and Broome County. I get my water from that sole source aquifer. And the actual aquifer recharge areas extend beyond the county boundaries. The vast majority of case studies of the past will suffer from the lack of accurate data. People who sign leases for drilling on their land are generally trusting and believing that the oil and gas industry will not damage their drinking water supplies and those of their neighbors. When such accidents occur, the employees of oil and gas corporations are the first to deny that this has anything to do with their activities. From a strict scientific standpoint, these statements may be correct, yet often the circumstantial evidence clearly points to a connection.
Today I'd like to focus in the limited time on the cumulative effects of the process, and specifically the cumulative effects of repeated fracking in the same well. There's been considerable experience with hydrofracking in conventional oil and gas fields for many years. The process in tight shale is vastly different. In tight shale formations, the process is performed at relatively higher pressures in dense shale of low porosity. It must be done at the initial completion of the well and then repeated many, many times over the life of the well. Experience with this type of tight shale hydrofracking on a large scale goes back less than 10 years. And only a few of the early wells have been fracked for the second time. All of them are going to have to be fracked many, many times over their life due to the rapid decline of these kinds of wells. We simply do not know what the cumulative effect of this repeated hydrofracking will be. And I would submit that this is one of the gaps that you should look at in your study. Each successive frac in a well will extend the fracture zone further from the horizontal wellbore. In areas like New York and Pennsylvania, where numerous existing natural fissures exist, such successive fracking increases the risk that the frac will break out of the target shale zone and into fissures that communicate with aquifers. It is important for the EPA to consider that hydrofracking will occur over and over and over again at each well, and to assure that the true cumulative risks of this activity are properly
as well as county health departments documenting hundreds of fires, explosions, massive wastewater spills, polluted water wells, and evacuated homes due to natural gas activities, including hydrofracking. Also reviewed data documenting that 20 million gallons of natural gas flowback wastewater was dumped into Central New York publicly owned treatment works since 2008 without fulfilling applicable headworks analysis and pretreatment requirements. Local pretreatment ordinances were exceeded up to 19-fold for phenol and nearly 10-fold for chemical oxygen demand. Given flowback wastewater's meager recovery rates of 9% to 35%, I believe hydrofracking constitutes deep well injection and warrants GA effluent limitations in New York, as well as other regulatory restrictions associated with underground injection control.